Now it's time to start a discussion about scope functions. So what are scope functions? Scope functions are functions which can be called on almost any object inside your code. And what those scope functions are basically doing is the same. They execute a block of code on an object. What's different is how this object becomes available inside the block and what is the result of the whole expression. The scope functions do not introduce any new technical capabilities, but they can make your code more concise and readable, as you'll see by looking at some examples. And because scope functions are very similar, choosing the right one can be a little bit tricky. And the question which arises is how you can distinguish between them. There are two main differences between scope functions. First is how you can refer how you refer the context object, and that is the object on which the scope function is called. And you can refer the context object either by using the this keyword or the it identifier. So this is the first difference. The second difference is the return value, because the scope function can return a value, and the return value can be either the context object, and the context object is the object on which the scope function is called, or the lambda result. And we'll see what all of this is in this video. And first I'm going to create a main function, because I deleted the main function here. And to create the main function, just type m, and IntelliJ is gonna give me some suggestion. You can choose main, the first one, or you can choose main a, and that is gonna be the main function with the args and the array of string. So I'm gonna choose the first one, and I'm gonna create a class down here. It's gonna be called user, and I'm gonna define the. I'm not gonna define the properties inside the primary constructor. I'm gonna define the properties inside the class. So I'm gonna type here var first name, and I'm gonna assign some default values. I'm gonna put equals, gonna be an empty string, var last name, also an empty string, and var age, I'm gonna put -1. Now here I'm gonna create a user, so I'm gonna type val user, I'm gonna put equals user. We need to call the primary constructor, but we don't have any properties because the properties are defined inside the class. And now if you want to define values to our properties, first name, last name, and age, for our user object that we create, we need to type user dot first name. We did this in a previous video, equals Alex user dot last name equals Dobinka, and user dot age equals 23. And this is fine, but what we have here is code repetition, because we have user dot first name, user dot last name, user dot age. And imagine if you have hundreds of properties, you will have to type user and user again and again. And with a scope function, specifically with the with scope function, we can make this, we can reduce this code repetition by using the with scope function. And the with scope function, you can refer the context object on the with scope function using this, and the result, the return value of the scope of the with scope function is the lambda result. But let's look how we can use. So actually let's put that code back to see exactly. So if I type here with, and here we need to pass the object on which you want to operate. I'm gonna pass our user object, and the next parameter is the lambda function. So we put curly braces and press enter. Now, because the with scope function, as I said, scope functions are used to make our code more concise and readable. Now we can avoid typing user.first name, user.last name, and so on, and you can just type here this, because this is how you can access the user object inside this lambda function, inside this scope function with this.first name equals Alex, this last name equals Tobinka, and this dot age equals 23. Let's press Ctrl Alt L to format the code, and now we have the same thing, but now we're using the this keyword and we didn't use the user again and again. And because Kotlin is about conciseness, we can also remove the this keyword because it will be generated under the cover. So we can delete this, also here, also here. And as you can see, now we don't need to use user dot first name, user last name. We can just type the first name, last name, and age, and you can assign the specific values to the properties. And now I can delete this because I don't need this. Let's press Ctrl Z. Let's bring this up a little bit. Now let's look at the return value of this scope function, and I said that the return value of this scope function is the lambda result. So this scope function can return something. So the lambda result means that this scope function will return whatever is the last line of code. So if the last line of code is an integer, and if I type here val result, now if I hover over the result to see what type it is, you see that result is of type of integer, because this is the last line of code, and the last line of code is going to be the value which is going to be returned. If I put here a text, let's say that I put here text, the lambda result, so the value which is returned, is going to be a string. So we have a string. So this is what lambda result means, and the value that is going to be returned specifically with the with scope function is going to be the last line of code. And you can also return the object, and to return the object, because you can refer the object using this, we can type here this, and now what is going to be returned is going to be the user object. So if I hover over here, now I have user. So this is what the lambda result is. The last line of code is going to be returned. Now next we're gonna look and now you see how this makes our code more concise and more readable. And next we're gonna look at the next scope function, which is the apply scope function. So let's delete the with scope function and let's look at the apply scope function. And the apply scope function, you can refer the context object also using this keyword, and the return value of the apply scope function is the context object. So the object on which the scope function is called is gonna be the object which is gonna be returned by the apply scope function. And we can call the scope function by, we can call it on an object. It's not like the with scope function which can receive the object. So we type here dot apply, because we're gonna look at the apply, and here you can type this dot first name, so similar to the with scope function, Alex, this dot last name equals Dobinka, and this dot age equals 23. So this is similar to with the with scope function, but the difference is that it cannot receive a parameter. You need to call it on an object, so you call it on the user object that we created here. And we can also remove this, because this will be generated under the covers. And now the difference is that the return value, so if I delete this just to show you, the return value is this whole expression. So this entire object is going to be the return value. So if I put here 23, let's say, I have this, and it said this expression is unused because this is not going to be returned. So to show this more clearly, let's type here val user. So let's put equals. Let's press Ctrl Alt L to format the code. And now if I hover over here, you can see that this is a value of user. And if I type here 23, let's say, this is still a user because the return value is the context object, and that means that the return value is the object that is created here, so the entire object. So this is how you can use the apply function, so to provide some values to the properties. And now down here you can use the with scope function to print those values in the console. So you can type user. Instead of typing user first name and last name and age, you can type here print line, and you can type first name. Let's press Ctrl D 2 times, and you can put here last name and age. Now if you run this code, we get Alex, Dobinka, and 23. And now you can see here clearly how scope functions can make our code more concise and readable. And with the apply function, we defined some values to our properties. With the with, we output them in the console without using that user, that first name, and doing that repeatedly. The next scope function, and again, the return, I'm gonna repeat this, the return value of the apply scope function is the context object. So it's the object on which the apply function is called. So it's the object that is created here. So the user object is returned. So it's in contrast with the with scope function, which returned the lambda result. So whatever was the last line of code. So this is the difference between the two. And also the fact that the with scope function receives the object on which it wants to perform the operation. Here we call on the object the apply function. So but the main difference is what they return. So this returns the context object, the object on which is called. So, and this returns the lambda result. And next we're going to look at the also scope function. And the also scope function is used when we want to do some additional operation on an object after you instantiate it or after you created that object. So we're going to look at that next. So now let's look at the also scope function. And for that I'm going to move the properties that are defined inside the class inside the primary constructor. So I'm going to delete those. And I'm going to define them inside the primary constructor. You'll see immediately why. So I'm going to type val first name of type string, val last name of type string, and val age of type int. Now I'm going to delete the with scope function because we don't need this, and I'm also going to delete the apply scope function because we don't need this. Now the also scope function is used when you want to perform an extra operation after you initialize an object. So let's first initialize our object. So let's pass some values to the property of the primary constructor. So I'm going to type here Alex, Dobinka, and 23. Let's press Ctrl Alt L to format the code. Now let's delete the curly braces because we don't need those curly braces. And I'm gonna declare this class as a data class because I want to have the toString function auto-generated to have the string representation of the class. Now if I want to print the value of the properties of this class, because now it's a data class, I can just type here print line, and I can type here user. And now if you run this code, we get user, first name Alex, last name Dobinka, age 23. So we get the string representation of the object. But in order to get the string representation of our user class, we had to first initialize the object, then we store that into a variable, and then we use the print line to output that in the console. And with also, you can do this in a more concise way. So you can delete this. We can also delete the variable on which the user object is created, and I can type at the end of our object which was initialized dot, and we type also. So we type also and you press enter, or you just type, you can type also yourself, and you put the lambda function. Now here what I can do, because here now also scope function, you can refer the context object, so you can refer the object on which the lambda function is called using the it identifier. So what we can do here is you can type print line, and we can put here it, and it is the user object which was instantiated. Now if you run this code, we get user first name Alex, last name Domingo, age 23, and this is using the also scope function, and this is more readable and concise, and we did that by using the also function. Now what is the return value of this also function? The return value of this also function is the context object. So if I type here val result, I mean if I put equals, if I hover over the result, you can see the type is an user. So what the return value of the also function is the object itself. So it's the object on which the also function is called. So this entire expression is going to be returned inside our variable. So this is the also function, and again we can delete this because this looks more beautiful and concise. Next we're going to look at the let scope function. So let's close this. So let's look at the let scope function, and for that I'm going to delete this code because I don't need this code. And we generally use the let scope function to avoid null pointer exception. So let's declare here a variable, let's call it text, and it's going to be a nullable variable. So you put the exclamation mark here and we assign null to it. Now if we try to output this variable in the console, we get a null pointer exception because we assign null to it, so it has no value, so the compiler doesn't know what to do with that. But with a let scope function we can avoid that. We can print that, and we type text, so the object on which you want to call the function, and we put that, and we type let, and we press enter, and within the lambda, now to refer the context object, then to refer the object on which the function is called, the scope function is called, we use the it identifier. So we type here print line it, so print the value of the text you're saying here, in other words. But this will still throw a null pointer exception if I run this. So if I run this, we get null. And let's close this. And to avoid this, we need to use the let scope function along with the safe call operator. So we need to put at the end of our variable, we put question mark dot let, and then, so what we're saying here, let execute this block of code only if this value, this variable, the value of this variable is not null. Now if I run this, we don't get nothing because this is not now executed, because we said here execute this this code, the print the code inside the curly braces, the code inside the lambda, only if it's not null, and because it's null, it's not executed anything. But if we assign down here something to our text, let's put here equals name, let's declare it as a var. Now if I run this, now we get name because it executed the code inside the scope function of the lambda, so we executed this code, and the code is to output the value in the console, so we get name. And generally this is how you're gonna use the let function. You're gonna use along with the safe call operator on variables which are nullable, but it can be used in other cases too. And now next we're gonna look at the next scope function, and that is the run scope function. But before we do that, let's talk about what is the return value of this scope function. And the return value of this scope function is the lambda result. And that means that whatever is the last line of code, so if it is an integer, if it is a string or a char, that is going to be the value which is going to be returned. So if I put here, let's say text, not like that. So if I put here text, now if I put here val result equals, now this is gonna be a string, a nullable string. So this is how this is what the lambda result is, whatever is the last line of code. This, if as I said, if it is an integer or a string, that is gonna be returned by the scope function. So now let's look at the run function. Now let's look at the run scope function. For that, I'm gonna delete this code because you don't need this code. And I'm gonna create an user, val user, but it's gonna be a nullable user, and I'm gonna assign null to it. So I'm gonna type user nullable equals null. Now the run scope function is a combination of with and let function. So let's type the with function here, scope function. So let's type user and let's type print line, first name, let's press Ctrl D, let's change the last name, and to age. But now we have a problem, and that the problem is that this can be null, and we assign actually null to it. But because this is a nullable now user object, we cannot output this in the console, because we have an underline which says that only safe call. So you need to use the safe call or the not null assertion. And the only way to get around this and to get the values, to get the properties outputted in this way in the console, is to use a run function, a run scope function. And to use a run scope function, you just type user, we put the safe call operator dot, and we type run, and inside the run you can reference the object, the context object, using this. But because we looked already at this is can be omitted, you can type directly here. You can type here print line, first name, let's press Ctrl D, and now we don't have that underline that we have here. So print line, last name, and print line age. So this is what the run function is. It's a combination of let and with, and the return value is the lambda result. So whatever you type here, so if you type an integer, and if you type here val result, then if you hover over here, this is going to be an integer, a nullable integer. So whatever you type at the end of the whatever we type as the last line of code, that is going to be the type that is going to be returned by the scope function. So this is what the run scope function is doing. It's a combination of both with and let, and this is how you can use it. So this is our discussion about scope functions, and see you in the next video.